Bullies raid elderly black woman's house. 10 minutes later, she takes all of them down. 5 armed men broke into her house at 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning thinking she was just a helpless old woman. What they didn't know was that she was a former government operative who had spent decades slipping between counties like smoke, gathering evidence, and fighting for civil rights in the shadows. "You came to my house," Martha Jean said, her voice deadly calm as she pressed the barrel of her gun to the intruder's temple. Blood trickled down his forehead from the glass cuts, his tactical gear torn and useless. "You thought I was just bones and wood. You forgot to check the foundation." The man's eyes went wide with terror. "Please, we were just following orders." "Whose orders?" she demanded, stepping harder on his wounded thigh. He screamed, "I don't know. Some sheriff, Bryce. Sheriff Bryce paid us." "Please don't." But Martha Jean Barlow had been waiting 30 years for this moment. The armed men had no idea they just walked into the spider's web, and mercy wasn't part of the plan. Before we dive into the full story, welcome back to Mr. Billy's Stories, where we dive deep into the most incredible stories that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about people. I'm your host, and if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because today's story is going to blow your mind. To my amazing subscribers who keep coming back for these jaw-dropping narratives, thank you. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to me and help these stories reach people who need to hear them. Today, I'm bringing you the story of Martha Jean Barlow, a 72-year-old retired librarian who lived quietly in the small town of Pine Hollow. But what happened on one Thursday morning will change how you look at every quiet person you meet. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one everybody overlooks. Martha Jean Barlow hadn't left her house on Locust Street in 3 days. Not since she'd noticed the third pair of unfamiliar eyes tracking her from a car that didn't belong to anybody in Pine Hollow. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called out from across the street that Tuesday evening. "Martha Jean, you feeling all right, honey? Haven't seen you at the market." "I'm fine, Dolores," Martha Jean replied from her porch, not moving from her rocking chair. Just enjoying the quiet. But quiet was the last thing on her mind. The house, a weathered 2-story structure with green shutters and a roof she'd patched with her own hands, sat on a corner lot at the edge of Pine Hollow's old district. It was the kind of home folks drove past without looking too long. Not because it was abandoned, but because they knew who lived there, or thought they did. Most people just remembered her as the retired librarian with the sharp tongue and straighter spine than women half her age. A widow with no children. The woman who wore plaid every Sunday and took no nonsense from the deacons or the mayor. That Martha Jean, they'd whisper at the grocery store. Always been a tough one. August sure had his hands full with that one. If only they knew. What they didn't know, what even Mayor Henderson had forgotten, was that Martha Jean Barlow hadn't always shelved books and stamped due dates. Long before the silence, before the loss, she had worked under a different name. Sarah Mitchell, government badge number 4477, a brown briefcase that never left her side. A decade spent slipping between counties like smoke, gathering proof, intercepting files, and delivering them quietly to folks trying to desegregate schools, secure voter rights, and protect land deeds from men who thought power came from the color of their badges rather than the content of their character. Back then, her supervisor, Agent Williams, used to say, "Mitchell, you're 3 things that make you perfect for this job." "What's that, sir?" "Invisible, necessary, and dangerous as hell." She had been all 3. Then her husband, August, died. Hit by a truck on Highway 49, just 2 days before their 35th wedding anniversary. The driver? Never found. The truck? Never identified. The investigation? Closed within a week. Sheriff Dewey Bryce had come to her house that rainy October evening, hat in his hands, looking genuinely sad. "Martha Jean, I'm real sorry about August. We're doing everything we can to find who did this." "Are you, Dewey?" she'd asked, studying his face. "Of course we are. August was good people. You both are." But 3 weeks later, when she called for updates, his secretary would say, "Sheriff's in a meeting," or "He'll call you back," or "Case is still under review." The calls back never came. That's when Sarah Mitchell died and Martha Jean Barlow was born. She hung up her badge, cut her hair close, and took all that rage and folded it into structure. Morning tea at 6:45 sharp. Back porch sweep by 8 o'clock. Rain barrels checked every third Tuesday. Order gave her peace, or something close to it. For 24 years, she lived this life. 24 years of people thinking they knew exactly who she was. But that peace ended the day the letter arrived. It came in a cream-colored envelope with no return address, postmarked from Millerville, a town 50 miles north that she'd never heard of. Inside, one sheet of paper, printed clean and bold. We have reviewed your file and found discrepancies in the deed to 1247 Locust Street. A reassessment is underway. You will be notified of our findings shortly. Compliance is mandatory. You have 3 weeks. No signature. No official seal. No letterhead. Just a deadline. Martha Jean read it twice, then folded the letter once and placed it in her fireplace. She struck a match and watched it curl into ash. She had read enough documents in her 40-year life to know when one was a lie pretending to be legal. This wasn't from Richmond County. This wasn't from any government office she recognized. This was from them. The same them who had been circling properties like vultures for decades. The same them who had probably put August in the ground. The same them who thought an old black woman living alone would be an easy target. They were about to learn different. She called no one. Told no one. Instead, she went upstairs, opened the crawl space above the linen closet, and pulled down the black duffel bag she hadn't touched in 24 years. Inside were the pieces of a life she thought she'd buried. 3 false IDs, Sarah Mitchell, Joan Washington, and Linda Brooks. 2 encrypted radios that probably still worked, for burner phones in original packaging, 3 disposable cameras, and a hand-drawn map of Pine Hollow dated 1986 with names she hadn't said out loud since the Reagan era. And in the bottom of the bag, wrapped carefully in August's old wool scarf, was a Smith & Wesson .38 special gun, registered once in Ohio under the name Sarah Mitchell, then quietly unregistered everywhere else. She lifted it out slowly, feeling its familiar weight in her palm. "Hello, old friend," she whispered. She cleaned it methodically. Not from rust. She'd maintained it perfectly over the years. She cleaned it from memory, from doubt, from 24 years of pretending to be someone she wasn't. As she worked, muscle memory returned. The way her thumb naturally found the cylinder release. How her fingers automatically checked the firing pin. The smooth motion of loading and unloading that felt as natural as breathing. By the end of that first week, she knew they were watching. A blue sedan parked across from Miller's Hardware for 6 hours on Monday. No one inside, just watching her house. Wednesday, a man in coveralls fixed a telephone pole that didn't need fixing, spending an awful lot of time looking at her windows. Friday evening, she saw the shadow formation moving through the alley behind her garden. For figures crouched low, moving too quiet for casual neighbors. That's when she knew they weren't just trying to scare her. They were studying her, learning her routines, planning something bigger. By the second week, the threats stopped hiding. Tuesday morning, she found her truck keyed from front to back. Deep scratches that went all the way to the metal. Mrs. Patterson saw it too. Lord have mercy, Martha Jean. Who would do such a thing? Kids, probably, Martha Jean replied calmly, though her hand instinctively moved to the concealed holster she'd started wearing again. Thursday night, she woke to a sound on her porch. Something wet hitting the wood. She looked through the window and saw a plastic bag of raw meat, spoiled and blood-wet, tossed right by her front door. She didn't call the sheriff. Instead, she opened her door, picked up the bag, and walked it straight to her backyard incinerator. As the flames consumed it, she spoke to the darkness beyond her fence. "Y'all want to play games?" she said softly. "I invented games you ain't even heard of yet." Sunday morning changed everything. Martha Jean was sitting in her usual pew at Mount Calvary Baptist when young Timothy burst through the church doors. "Miss Martha Jean, Miss Martha Jean, your chicken coop's on fire." The congregation gasped. Pastor Williams immediately called for prayer. But Martha Jean just stood up calmly, gathered her purse, and walked out. By the time she got home, the fire department was already there. The flames hadn't spread. Whoever said it knew exactly what they were doing. Just enough fire to destroy the coop and kill her 6 chickens, but not enough to damage neighboring properties or draw too much attention. Sheriff Bryce showed up 20 minutes later, looking annoyed. "Martha Jean, I'm real sorry about this. Probably just some bored kids, you know how they get." He said it with a smirk. "Bored kids, she repeated flatly. Yeah, summertime mischief. Boys being boys. I'll have my deputies keep an extra eye out. But between you and me, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. Maybe it's time you thought about moving somewhere safer. Somewhere more appropriate for someone your age. Martha Jean looked at him for a long moment. This man who used to sit on her porch in the 90s, sipping sweet tea and saying, "You watch, Martha Jean. One day they'll try to come for what's left of us." Now here he was, suggesting she should just give up and leave. "I appreciate your concern, Dewey," she said carefully. "But I think I'll stay put." His smile faded. "Your choice. But I can't guarantee your safety if you insist on being stubborn." That night, she saw them again. The shadow formation in her backyard. But this time, they weren't just watching. They were measuring, counting steps from her back door to the alley, timing how long her lights stayed on, checking sight lines from the street. That's when Martha Jean knew. They weren't just trying to scare her anymore. They were planning to take her. She didn't call 911. Instead, she called Clay. He picked up on the third ring. Auntie. Clay wasn't really her nephew. He was August's brother's boy. But after August died, Clay had made it clear that family was family, blood or not. More importantly, Clay had done 2 tours in Afghanistan and now worked in private security, which Martha Jean understood to mean he had access to equipment that regular people didn't. "I'm cashing in that favor you owe me," she said without preamble. Silence on the other end. "Then, you sure about this, Auntie? Once I bring you that stuff, there's no going back." "I'm not sure about much anymore," she replied, watching the shadows move through her yard. "But I know this ain't random, and I know they're not planning to ask nicely next time." He sighed. "What do you need?" "Not the full kit. Just the feeds, the backdoor cameras, and that signal jammer you told me about. I'll drop them by dawn." "And Auntie." "Yeah. You remember everything I taught you about tactical movement?" Martha Jean smiled for the first time in weeks. "Boy, I was moving tactical before you were even born." "Yes, ma'am. I'll see you in the morning." For the next 2 days, Martha Jean Barlow rigged her house like a woman preparing for war. Motion sensors behind the porch swings, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. A tripwire beneath the ivy wall that ran along her front walkway, connected to a mechanism Clay had designed that would trigger multiple responses at once. Camera feeds wired through the floorboards to an old laptop hidden beneath her laundry basket in the utility room. At dusk each evening, she poured bleach along the walkway, not to clean, but to eliminate any scent trails or footprints that might give away her own movements. At dawn, she mapped the sound patterns of her house, how the wind made the kitchen curtains sway, which floorboards creaked and which ones didn't, where shadows fell at different times of day. Everything had a purpose. Everything had meaning. She moved through the house like a woman stitching a shroud, because Martha Jean Barlow knew exactly what was coming. They would arrive on a Thursday. It was always Thursday. They arrived on Thursday morning at 7:47 a.m. Martha Jean was sitting in her kitchen, sipping her morning tea and watching the street through her lace curtains when the first vehicle pulled up, a nondescript pickup truck. 2 white men in their early 20s stepped out, wearing tactical boots that cost more than most folks in Pine Hollow made in a month. Their faces were clean but blank, the kind of expression you get when you've been told not to think, just follow orders. "Not from around here," she murmured to herself, noting how they moved. Too rigid, too practiced. These weren't local boys playing tough. 5 minutes later, a second vehicle arrived, a matte black SUV with tinted windows. 3 men this time. The one who stepped out first wore a sheriff's deputy patch, but Martha Jean's trained eye caught what others would miss. The county name had been carefully removed. "Fake badge," she whispered, taking another calm sip of her tea. "Amateur hour." The last vehicle didn't park. It rolled slowly down Locust Street, a flatbed truck with windows so dark they looked painted. The driver took his time, scanning each house, each yard, each possible escape route. Martha Jean watched it all from behind her curtain, then moved without hurry. She placed her tea kettle on the stove and turned the heat to high, walked to the hallway and turned on the old radio, adjusting it to static, just loud enough to mask movement, but not loud enough to seem suspicious. Opened the dish drawer and pulled out her gun, checking the cylinder one final time. 6 bullets. More than enough. Then she sat down in the hallway chair, her back against the wall, and waited. At 8:12 a.m. exactly, They made their move. The first sound wasn't a knock. It was a boot, heavy and deliberate, slamming against her back door. "Open up," a voice shouted. "This is an enforcement order." Martha Jean smiled. No badges announced. No warrant read. No paperwork mentioned. Just like she expected. "Enforcement order for what?" she called back, her voice carrying the perfect tone of a confused elderly woman. "Property seizure. Open the door now." "I don't understand." "What property seizure? I need to see some identification." She heard them talking among themselves, muffled voices through the door. She's stalling. "Doesn't matter. We got our orders. Remember, we needed to look legal." Like she resisted. She's about to resist a whole lot more than she thinks. They all laughed. Martha Jean stopped smiling. At 8:15, they breached. The front door went first, kicked in with a hollow crunch that echoed through the house. Two men entered fast, flashlights cutting through the dim hallway, radios crackling on their belts. The first man swept left toward the living room. The second went straight down the hallway. Neither of them saw the fishing line stretched ankle-high between the baseboards. Neither of them noticed that the overhead light bulb had been tampered with. The second man reached for the light switch. "Hello, boys," Martha Jean said from the shadows. He flipped the switch. The bulb exploded in a shower of glass and fire. Martha Jean had spent Tuesday evening carefully drilling a tiny hole in that bulb, filling it with sugar water and ground cayenne pepper. When the electricity hit it, the mixture turned into a burning projectile that erupted directly into the man's face. He screamed, a sound that cut through the morning air like a siren. His hands flew to his eyes as glass and burning liquid dripped down his cheeks. "I can't see. I can't see." The first man spun around, shouting into his radio. "We've got resistance. Subject is," his foot caught the fishing line. The 90-pound bookshelf that Martha Jean had strategically loaded with bricks and positioned against the wall came crashing down like a landslide. It caught him square in the chest, pinning him against the opposite wall with a sickening crunch. He tried to scream, but the weight had knocked all the air from his lungs. Martha Jean stepped out of the shadows, her gun steady in her hands. "You came to my house," she said, looking down at the man trapped under the bookshelf. "You thought I was just bones and wood." She aimed carefully. One shot. Center mass. He stopped moving. The back door burst open as two more men rushed in, moving smarter this time. They'd heard the gunshot. They knew their friends were down. "Kitchen clear," one shouted. "Moving to the den," called the other. But Martha Jean wasn't in the kitchen or the den anymore. She was in the stairwell. 24 years of living in this house meant she knew every creak, every shadow, every angle. She could move through it blindfolded. The men were searching room by room, following proper clearing procedures. But they were clearing the wrong rooms. Martha Jean had gone up 5 steps, crossed 2 steps to the right, then came back down through the rear staircase that led directly behind the den. She flanked them while they were still looking for her in front. The first man was crouched by the window, peering into the backyard. He never heard her coming. The crowbar, filed down to a razor edge over the past 2 days, caught him at the base of the neck. Not a killing blow, but close enough. He dropped like a stone, gagging on his own blood. The second man spun around, gun raised. "Drop your weapon. Drop it now." "No," Martha Jean said simply. He fired. Too fast. Too panicked. The bullet went wide, splintering the doorframe 6 inches to her left. Her shot didn't miss. The gun barked once, and the man buckled as the bullet tore through his thigh. He went down hard, his weapon skittering across the hardwood floor. Martha Jean walked over and kicked it away, then stood over him as he writhed on the ground. "Please," he gasped, clutching his leg. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Please, I got kids. I got a family." "So did I," she replied coldly. "Had a husband too. Until your boss arranged for him to meet a truck on Highway 49. The man's eyes went wide. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." She pressed the barrel of her gun to his temple. "But let me refresh your memory. Who sent you here?" "I can't." She pushed harder, and he screamed. "Who sent you?" "Bryce. Sheriff Bryce. He paid us $5,000 each to come here and make it look like you were resisting some kind of legal action." "What legal action?" "I don't know. Something about your property deed being fake. He said you were squatting on land that didn't belong to you." Martha Jean's blood went cold. My deed is 40 years old. My husband and I bought this house fair and square. I know. I know. But Bryce said, he said there were irregularities. Said the county needed the land for development. What kind of development? The man was crying now, whether from pain or fear, she couldn't tell. Some kind of shopping center. Big money involved. He said you were the last holdout, and if we could just scare you into leaving, but scaring didn't work, did it? Martha Jean asked. So what was the real plan? Silence. She cocked the hammer. The real plan. We were supposed to make it look like a break-in gone wrong, he sobbed. Make it look like you fought back and we had to defend ourselves. Self-defense. Martha Jean stared down at him for a long moment. You came to my house to murder me and steal my land. We were just following orders. You came to my house, she repeated, her voice deadly calm, thinking I was just a helpless old woman. You forgot to check the foundation. She walked to the kitchen, stepping over the bodies, and picked up the phone. Clay? It's done. All of them. All of them. But this ain't over. Not by a long shot. What do you need? Remember that folder August left in the attic? The one with all the bank records and land surveys. Yeah. Time to see what's really in there. Because I got a feeling Sheriff Dewey Bryce has been playing a much bigger game than just my little house. That afternoon, while Clay dealt with the cleanup and the proper authorities, Martha Jean climbed into her attic for the second time in 24 years. The folder was exactly where August had left it, wrapped in plastic and hidden behind the Christmas decorations. Inside were documents that made her hands shake, bank ledgers showing payments from out-of-state LLCs to local officials. Copies of mineral surveys that claimed to have found valuable deposits under properties throughout Pine Hollow. Surveys that Martha Jean knew were completely fabricated. Payment trails leading back to a development company based in Atlanta, with a local contact listed as D. Bryce, Richmond County Sheriff's Office. And at the bottom of the folder, a handwritten note from August. Martha Jean, if something happens to me, it's because I found out too much. Dewey Bryce isn't just corrupt. He's been selling our community piece by piece to developers for 20 years. Your house sits on the last piece they need for their shopping center. They'll come for you next. I'm sorry I can't protect you, but I know you can protect yourself. All my love, August. Martha Jean sat in that dusty attic and cried for the first time since August's funeral. Not from sadness, from rage. By noon the next day, Clay had uploaded everything to 3 independent watchdog networks. By nightfall, the story had been picked up by news outlets across the state. By morning, Pine Hollow wasn't a secret anymore. The headlines read, Elderly woman survives home invasion. Exposes massive land fraud ring in small southern town. The raid footage from Martha Jean's security cameras aired on every major network. The fake sheriff's badges, the coordinated attack, the confession about Sheriff Bryce, all of it captured in crystal clear video. Sheriff Dewey Bryce resigned before lunch, citing health concerns. The development company's offices in Atlanta were raided by federal agents. Of the 5 attackers, 2 were revealed to be contractors tied to a ghost security firm that specialized in property acquisition services for developers who didn't want to wait for legal processes. One was the son of Pine Hollow's zoning official. The other 2 had records for intimidation and assault stretching back 15 years. None of them would be intimidating anyone ever again. 3 weeks later, Martha Jean Barlow did something she hadn't done in decades. She gave an interview. You want to know what I learned? She told the reporter, sitting on her front porch in her favorite rocking chair. I learned that evil people count on good people being too polite, too scared, or too tired to fight back. And what would you say to other people facing similar threats? Martha Jean looked directly into the camera. I'd say this. Don't let them fool you into thinking you're helpless. Don't let them convince you that fighting back makes you the bad guy. And most importantly, she paused, her eyes hard as steel. Don't ever let them think they know who you are based on what they see on the surface. Any regrets about how things went down? Just one, she said, rocking slowly. I regret that it took them this long to try me. 6 months later, Pine Hollow looked different. The corrupt officials were gone. The fake development plans were scrapped. Property values went up because people finally felt safe investing in a community that wouldn't be stolen out from under them. And Martha Jean Barlow? She planted new roses along the edge of her porch, blood-red ones that bloomed brighter than any flowers Pine Hollow had ever seen. She painted her front door the same color. And every morning, she sat in that rocking chair with her Bible on her lap, not to preach, but to remind herself that even vengeance, when earned, can look like justice in the right hands. The people of Pine Hollow never bothered her again, but they sure kept their distance, because now they understood something they should have known all along. Martha Jean Barlow wasn't just a memory from Pine Hollow's quiet past. She was a warning about what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. And if you're watching this story thinking about the quiet people in your own life, your grandmother, your librarian, that elderly neighbor who keeps to herself, maybe it's time you realize that still waters don't just run deep. Sometimes they run dangerous. What do you think about Martha Jean's story? Have you ever been underestimated because of your age, your appearance, or your quiet nature? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story taught you something about never judging a book by its cover, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will change how you see the world. Because as Martha Jean Barlow proved, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everybody overlooks. Until next time, this is Mr. Billy Stories, reminding you that heroes come in all shapes, sizes, and ages, and justice doesn't always wear a badge.